Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you guys are at. I hope you're having a fantastic day. It's SoulSaint here, and we got another banger video coming up for you with Raid Shadow Legends. Now, we have a new fusion that's being broadcasted for this month, and it is Ishiyama the Immovable. It's going to be an HP Spirit legendary champion for the Shadowkin tribe, basically. I wanted to break down his kit and kind of give like a little bit of a synopsis of my opinion on this this upcoming fusion, and give you guys an idea of whether or not this should be good for you or not. And kind of precursor and give you some justification as to why, and maybe some areas we could see some value in. Okay, so with that being said, I think he looks pretty interesting. We'll show his full turnaround at the end of this video after we break down the information on his kit. But let's get into it. So his A1 Burning Comet attacks one enemy 2 times. Each hit transfers a random debuff from this champion to the target. If this champion is under any debuffs when attacked, counterattacks with this skill. So there's a lot of opportunities to not only counterattack, but also to transfer the debuffs that are on him to the opponent. So that kind of helps him with like a pseudo cleanse in a way. So that's interesting. Basically, all his books are going to be just for scaling of damage up to a total of 20%. Calculated Volley, his A2, is going to be a 4-turn cooldown, bookable down to a 3-turn cooldown. Attacks all enemies, has a 75% chance, can go up to 100 with the books, of placing a fear debuff, a decrease crit damage debuff, and a decreased crit rate debuff on all enemies for 2 turns. These debuffs cannot be resisted by enemies who are already under 2 or more debuffs. Interesting. So Fear has become a very interesting mechanic, I think only in like Ram form right now where Chimera could be valuable, so there is something there. Decreased crit damage, decreased crit rate could also be pseudo valuable for Chimera as well in terms of debuff placement. There is one or two that requires having a debuff count being on the board. But I'm not necessarily sure if these are like the big ones that require us to really like say this guy is worth going for. Now, being able to have an irresistible debuff set in his kit with the condition that you have already 2 other debuffs already in play is interesting. You could see maybe somebody that is a setup champion to initially kind of give Ishiyama a little bit of like a setup, you know, basically like precursor to that, so that when he gets to his turn, the debuffs are already irresistible because there's already enough debuffs in play. But with that being said, I digress. Finish them. Their A3 is going to be a 4-turn cooldown, bookable down to a 3-turn cooldown. Attacks one enemy. It will ignore 25% of the target's defense, will ignore 50% instead if the target is under 2 or more debuffs, yet again. Places a block damage buff on this champion for 2 turns if this kills an enemy. The damage increase is cool. The cooldown down to a 3-turn cooldown is pretty cool. If you can kill someone, you get block damage, which is pretty cool. I don't know. It seems like we have a lot of conditional aspects about this champion that makes him a very interesting one for us, to be honest with you. But let's continue reading, see if there's anything else that could be interesting about this champion. The Immovable, it's his passive. Whenever an enemy resists a debuff by this champion, the next debuff placed by this champion is going to be irresistible, so it can't be resisted. Each debuff placed by this champion increases by 3%, up to 30% stacked. That's not too bad. That's pretty cool. And of course, he has an ally HP in all battles by 28%, which is pretty nice for him being considered he's a HP nuker in general. So the synopsis that we got from Plarium was that this champion is going to be more so intrinsically designed for PvP. With that being said, he's very conditional. And that's the problem that I have initially with him, amongst some other things. So you'd have to have multiple debuffers in a sense, which is kind of harder to do in today's meta because you have to placate either room for someone who's going to be doing buff stripping or lockout. I mean, think Fabian, for example, or like your Crixia, your Yumiko, just to name a few options that do like lockout in some degree. Being able to rotate back into giving him the opportunity to have 2 debuffs already on the enemy is kind of strained in that regard. It's not impossible, but it is strained because you're already kind of prioritizing either putting, you know, support champions in one part of this, you know, your team slots, and then, you know, your setup champions in another, and then your debuffer or your damage dealers have to kind of just get in and get the ball going, right? With that being said, him being conditional kind of raises some concerns and lowers the value of this champion, in my opinion. If he was able to just have irresistible straight out, then this champion could be a lot more of a conversation topic, particularly with some dynamics involved with it. But with that being said, if he can be set up upon, or being able to, like, someone can be like a precursor to him, then you could see some value. And I think that would be pretty interesting. Now, as always, my speculation is going to start and stop at where are the multipliers for us to be able to determine whether or not this champion's going to be able to do a lot. More often than not, they kind of try to be very reserved with HP nukers, because HP nukers can go pretty high in terms of that stat value. So if the multiplier is too strong, it'd be a little bit of a problem, right? With that being said, though, a lot of his stuff being conditional in terms of survivability in the event that he isn't able to kill somebody is basically non-existent, and that's kind of a concern. Today's meta, I think, screams for fatal prevention or champions that can keep the ball going no matter what happens with their passive. So that's a little bit of a knock there too as well. And then my final issue with him is that he is a spirit champion. Today's meta, some of the more predominant champions you're going to see are mainly magic focused. I want you to think about the mythic pool that we have right now currently with Nais or Siegfried, or let's see who else is in there that might be up there. Lazarius, just to name a few, that would be really, really good. Now, that's not to say that this champion's bad. I mean, we've seen champions like Carnage who've come in and out, and they've been able to do very, very good work against said enemies, but it's by means of targeting other areas to still get the benefit. And this champion doesn't really necessarily say that, yeah, I could target someone else and still get value out of someone that I'm normally not a good matchup against. So he drops in value, and obviously there's a mythical versus a legendary conversation that goes there, and I think that should always be a part of that, like, caveat there. But with that being said, it's a fusion champion, so should you go for it? I think if you don't have any type of nuker that you feel like is substantial, and you want an option that's HP based that can maybe survive some of the fight as well because you're already scaling into a defensive stat, obviously this could be a good option. If you're looking for something down the road, I want you guys to maybe consider looking a little bit more towards the future. If you haven't saw my most recent video, I pulled for a couple prisms just to see if I can finish up my faction guardians, and I pulled some offline, and I ended up getting my extra duplicate, which was a Kimmy, by the way. But it still begs the question that, like, this is going to be a champion that's introduced to the champion pool permanently after this fusion is finished. So if you do the fusion now and you still happen to acquire him down the road, that's one extra faction guardian that you don't have to worry about, and that could be very valuable depending on how you're looking at, you know, the longevity of your account. If you're looking to min-max every single stat that you can get value in, then obviously getting a copy of this could be very valuable too. Now, I will say, overall, I kind of feel like he's a little bit lackluster. But I don't want to dissuade anybody depending on where your account is at. Your progression is going to be a little bit different than mine. Being in-game and whatnot, I have a lot of options, and some of those may be a little bit more viable for PvP as an outlet. And I think that's where my synopsis is going to kind of start and end here there too as well. I think he's an interesting champion. The conditionals are a little bit of a drawback. However, his counterattack is pretty interesting with being able to enable him to keep himself going. With cleansing himself in a sense. I think that's kind of cool. But with that being said, I feel like this is a very interesting champion that obviously we have to get a little bit more information, but he doesn't seem too enticing for me for now. Anyways, with that being said, I want to show you guys, I'm going to disappear here for a brief moment. I want you guys to check this out and see how he looks. We're going to go and start from the beginning here. Very, very cool looking. He has this, like, regal, he almost looks like Kirito almost to some degree, just a little bit on the more veteran side, a little bit more older. I love the double katana behind him with the, I don't know what they call that weapon, but basically like a ranged set of, like, mace maul. I don't know exactly the name of it. Maybe you guys can tell me in the comments below. He has a bell like attached to his waist, and as well as some extra things. I mean, just the aesthetic is always looking really, really cool. And of course, obviously, having some Japanese nuance, some aesthetic behind, you know, the Shadowkins is always kind of like, you can tell the inspiration is there. So I think he's a very, very cool looking champion. I actually think the design department, they never miss. They really don't. So I don't see how you can, you know, look at this game and say it's not pretty. So with that being said, you guys gotta let me know in the comments below. Are you guys interested in this champion? I kind of feel like it's a pass for me, realistically speaking. Now, I don't know if there's any other additional information regarding this champion. I believe it's going to be a fragment one. So here's another thing I want to toss y'all's way in case y'all may be interested. Maybe not so much for the champion himself, but if you guys are, mod 69 out of 100 is where I'm at. If I were to get extra copies, extra fragments that, even though I don't care for the champion, I wanted to translate them into something I may care about, like Mother Mod, for example. Then that could be one way you could also approach this this fusion as well, because he is going to be fragment based. So I think that is a notch in the W department if you want to get some alternative value outside of this champion. So not too bad, not too bad, not too bad. You guys let me know in the comments below. Are you guys going to go for this champion or not? I'm very curious to hear y'all's opinion. Is there something I'm missing? I do think that the HP stack is nice. I don't think that most fights typically go the distance to a point where you can get the full scaling of your stack. You have to place like at least 10 debuffs by himself in order for that to work. So there's obviously like a possibility, but there is also a possibility you don't hit that. I mean, he does at least 3 debuffs by himself. So if he does at least 3 by 4, then maybe you can get that in one go. It's possible, but by that point you are already kind of mostly done with the fight. So I don't know. I'm very curious if that's enough, you know. And I don't feel like it's justifiable. I feel like the biggest knock for him, forgetting his kit for a second, it's just the fact that he's Spirit Affinity. I feel like that makes it more difficult to incorporate. Now, that's not to say he can't be good against champions like Alaj or maybe even Galactor in terms of like affinity matchup. Now, with that being said, I mean, there's a bigger uphill battle to fight with like his passive, for example, but nevertheless, still pretty cool. Anyways, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and as always remember, stay ascended.
Yeah.